All right. So, just so I'm not sure if everybody online here is familiar with the groups that are have been sponsoring this presentation tonight. So I just wanted to let people know kind of who's behind this. So basically, it's kind of been a collaborative effort to pull together a series of fall and winter educational presentations focused on the Siskiyou Mountains and the Applegate Watershed. The three groups that are working together on that are the Applegate Neighborhood Network, the Williams Community Forest Project, and the Siskiyou Crest Coalition. So for folks that don't maybe know who we are, the Applegate Neighborhood Network is a local conservation-based organization. We operate all throughout the Applegate Valley from the confluence of the river down near the Rogue River and down near Wilderville, all the way up to the Siskiyou Crest and the headwaters of the Applegate River watershed. So we focus on that area, and we promote kind of a community and conservation focus within the entire watershed. The Williams Community Forest Project, for folks that maybe are not aware of who they are, they focus on conservation and stewardship issues in the Williams Valley. And they're one of our co-sponsors tonight for this presentation. So yeah, they're working mainly on forest land issues and kind of, again, that confluence between community and forest issues, in particular in the Williams Valley watershed and in the Williams Creek watershed. And then the Siskiyou Crest Coalition, folks may have not have heard about the Siskiyou Crest Coalition. We're sort of a new group that's working on issues throughout the Applegate area and the Siskiyou Mountains, and we're dedicated to promoting the permanent protection of wildlands in the Applegate and the greater region along the Siskiyou Crest. So that coalition is made up of partnered organizations such as the Williams Community Forest Project, Applegate Neighborhood Network, Wellington Wildlands Council, and others. And then there's a lot of local individuals that are getting involved and helping in that effort as well. So they're also co-sponsors tonight, that coalition, that group that all three of the Applegate Neighborhood Network and the Williams Community Forest Project are both a part of. And then I just wanted to let people know that we are going to be doing online presentations, hopefully throughout the fall and winter. Right now we have a couple more lined up. We're probably going to be doing about one a month. So next month, I'm going to be advertising pretty quickly here, a presentation that I'm going to be doing, looking at historic lookout photos in the Applegate area. So looking at these, there's a series of photos that were taken in the 1930s from every lookout in the region. And I have some other historic photos of the Applegate area, and we're going to be looking at kind of historical ecology, some before and after shots from those lookouts, and kind of looking at how the landscape has maybe changed over the course of, say, 70, 80 years here in the Applegate Valley. And then we're also working on organizing another presentation in November, which we're going to be doing with Michael Kaufman from the Backcountry Press and from the Conifer Country blog. Michael is a major conifer nerd, so he spends a lot of time running around in the backwoods of the Klamath Mountains, mapping out rare conifer populations. And he's going to be doing a presentation for us in November. And that's going to be looking at some rare conifer populations and some mapping and research that he's done on Pacific silver fir and Alaska yellow cedar in the Klamath Siskiyou and in the Applegate watershed. So that's going to be November. And just, people can keep their eyes peeled for advertisements about those. They're going to be coming out pretty quickly. And we're hoping that people can participate in those as well. The other way that you could get updates about those kind of things is if you want to get signed up on the ANN or Applegate Neighborhood Network email list. We can send you updates about these kind of events and presentations, hikes that we're leading, and things like that. So you could get on the Applegate Neighborhood Network website, which is applegateneighborhood.network, and scroll down to the bottom of the page and sign up there if you want to do that. I also wanted to just let people know that you can, if people have questions that they might like to ask, we're going to kind of hold off on a lot of those questions till the end. But if you put those into the chat, we're going to be tracking those and trying to, answer those questions at the end in a Q&A session. The other thing to mention real quickly is that I know a lot of folks that are on tonight are also signed up for the hike tomorrow. So Chaz is also going to be leading a hike to go look at the geology of the Grayback Pluton in this area that he's going to be talking about tonight on the ground. And it's a really beautiful hike up in the Oregon Caves National Monument and the Kangaroo Roadless area. And so that's going to be tomorrow, meeting at the Williams Grange at 9 o'clock, and then caravanning up to the trailhead. So hopefully folks that are signed up, we'll be seeing you all tomorrow. And just with that, I guess I'm just going to turn this over to Chaz for his presentation, but I just give you a quick little bit of background on Chaz. He's a geologist. He's worked for the Williams Creek Watershed Council, developing habitat restoration projects in the Williams Valley, and also, around the Applegate. He's studied at the University of Oregon, earned a MS in geologic sciences, and then taught geology at the Rogue Community College. So Chaz lives and works in Williams, and he's helped to compile kind of the latest review and geologic mapping of the Williams area, highlighting the streams and the hydrological systems in the Williams watershed. So he's going to be presenting about that tonight, and he's a wealth of information and a Applegate Valley neighbor. So thanks, Chaz, for coming out tonight, and thanks to everybody else for participating. So I'm going to turn it over to Chaz.
All right, thanks, Luke. That was really nice. Cheryl, did you have a comment?
Yes, thanks, Chaz, and thanks, Luke. Great comments. So on Monday, the Applegate Neighborhood Network will have a petition online to Senator Wyden. Senator Wyden will, in the next, Luke, you want to talk about this? No. So shortly, Senator Wyden is going to be determining the wild and scenic designations, and we have a petition to him that will be on the Applegate Neighborhood Network website on Monday. So please fill that out and send it in. Thanks.
All right, thanks for that, Cheryl. Okay, well, what we're here to do tonight is really look at the geology of Williams Valley and the Grayback Pluton. They are a small portion of the Klamath-Siskiyou region, so hopefully we'll see that it's an example of what kind of geology will be there. Now, I'm going to take the chat and I'm going to try to paste some notes in here. We'll see if that works. So I pasted some notes in here. It looks like I got a portion of it. So you'll see this is an outline of what we'll be covering. I think it only takes so much at a time, so I may have to paste several times. But this will kind of give you an idea of what we're doing here. I'll paste a second. Let's see, the second root of it. And this kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about, and you can also look at that later. So there we go. I hope you can get a little bit of that. I'm going to leave that and go on. So thank you all for coming. This is a favorite topic of mine, is to look at the geology of Williams and also the Grayback Pluton. And really it's been one that we have done some mapping here several years ago with the Williams Creek Watershed Council to try to understand a little more detail about the geology and incorporate it into our stream flow systems so we can understand how our habitat develops and look at the longevity of our watershed. So what I'm going to do here is start my slideshow, and we'll start looking at some of the pictures. So hopefully you can see the first page there. It's called the Geology of the Williams Watershed and the Grayback Pluton. And this one also is a picture of the Williams Basin. Now you'll see the Applegate River runs across the screen at the lower portion, and the Williams Basin is sort of a bowl-shaped structure with Grayback Pluton in the background. So that's sort of the introductory shot to give you an idea of what Williams is like. It's a low-lying valley with a high mountain ridge behind it, and it contains quite a bit of different variety of habitats that are found in that basin. Here's a picture from the ground of the West Fork of Williams Creek, looking up to Sugarloaf and Grayback, just to show you the lush forests that grow on these mountain ridges. And the structure of it is a multiple peak system that you'll see, especially with this Grayback Pluton. And the Grayback Pluton sort of dominates the geology in this area. And we'll start to look at that and get a feel for how that works. Now here's a shot looking at the back of Grayback or Sugarloaf. And you'll notice that we have several outcrops of gabbro and ultramafic rocks that extend up to the peak with a little touch of snow in this later part of the spring. It also has quite a few forested areas and meadows, high mountain meadows that are on the back wall or the south-facing wall of the Grayback Complex. Now this shot is looking at the front face of Grayback. And you'll notice here's some snow covering the 7. This is the front face that enters into the Williams Valley and eventually drains down into Rock Creek. Here's a large meadow where landslides have opened up and kept this meadow active. And it's a bowl-shaped structure, probably reminiscent of some glaciation in the past. But you can look off in the distance. Here's Grayback Peak off here. This looks like might be Lake Mountain over in this area, maybe Mount Elijah, and all the way back into the peaks of the Siskiyous. And the Siskiyou Mountains extend all the way to the coast here. They have a variety of different habitats. Siskiyou Mountains, especially the Klamath Mountains in this area, are deeply dissected with steep valleys, rushing rivers and streams. It's been eroding the hard and soft rocks over 100 million years or more to build the landscape that we see today. This picture looks down over Sugarloaf and Grayback into the Williams Valley. And you can kind of see the Williams Valley in here. The Applegate River runs off in the distance. This kind of gives you a perspective of the Grayback Complex. It's a 7,050 foot high mountain peak, and it contains several different peaks that grace the skyline here. And it contains a variety of alpine habitats along with heavily forested slopes that feed many of the streams in Williams and also in the Carberry and Sucker Creek basins. The Grayback Complex also has several lakes. This is Miller Lake, a picture of Miller Lake, one of the lakes in the region. And then also just some of the landscapes, the rich landscapes. You can see a stream system where the hardwoods are turning yellow. Most of these are conifers. The Grayback Complex houses an incredible variety of different conifers that are abundant, healthy, and thriving on this mountain slope. Here's another picture of just some of the conifers looking up to the hillsides. The Williams Basin contains a big variety of forested trees, hardwoods and softwoods. And the hike through the forest is probably the best way to see this. This is just an inkling of what you might see with the hard rock structures on the peaks that are exposed and the forest covering most of the landscape around the mountain system. So this is a picture of the physiography of the Northwest California by Michael Kaufman. And he drew the outlines of the physiographic features of the Klamath Mountain region, where most of the conifers that we look at are found. This is, of course, a physiographic map, not a geologic map, but this kind of gives us an idea of the boundaries that we're looking at for the heavily forested regions of the Siskiyou provinces. But if we look at the geology of Oregon, we have to realize that Oregon is made up of many different types of terrains. And we'll be looking here at the Klamath Mountain terrains. The Klamath Mountain terrains is just a small section in the southwest portion of Oregon. But of course, we have the Coast Range, we have the Cascades, the Basin Range, high lava plains, Blue Mountains, the Oahe uplands, and of course, the Deschutes region. So this is just the general pattern of the geology of Oregon. It's a patchwork of a variety of different types of rocks. And we're going to be basically focusing on the Klamath Mountain terrain. Now, one of the things about the Klamath Mountains is they are part of the accreted terrain. So the accreted terrains of Western North America extend all the way from Alaska all the way down into Mexico. These are various different sections of accreted terrains that have occurred over the last 300 million years, building up the western portion of North America. Now you will see that there are various different types of structures. The one at the top is the island arc. And island arcs are what we're going to be looking at today in the Klamath province. And the Klamath province is right here in this red portion. So an island arc is an arc-shaped structure of islands, usually volcanic islands that built off the coast or formed from submarine volcanism that has reached the surface of the ocean, creating some type of island structure. Now the islands can vary considerably. Most of them are volcanic in origin, but along with those volcanoes, we do have lots of sediments that accumulate around an island. The other thing that we do find are coral reefs, fringing reefs that occur around those islands, different types of volcanic rocks. These are all part of the accreted terrains, and those accreted terrains build up the western portion of North America. So you can see it's a fairly extensive type structure, but very common. It makes a very complex rock structure, and the geologic patterns are really kind of interesting. Been very difficult for geologists to unravel this geology, but we have a pretty good picture of how it's formed and what it's made of. To move forward, here's a map by Marley Miller of U of O of the Klamath Mountain geology. Now, the Klamath Mountain geology is really quite interesting and probably one of my favorites. So let's see what we can do about looking at the Klamath Mountain geology. These here are the oldest rocks. Those the Eastern Klamath terrain. The Eastern Klamath terrain is made up of a large section of limestone and marble. That limestone and marble is the oldest rocks in the Klamath Mountains. The next section we'll look at is the Western Paleozoic terrain, and that's the part that we're going to be looking at today. That western section is pretty extensive. You'll notice it's pretty green. The green color is an important thing that we think about, and the pink is another one. So the green designates that it's a Mesozoic rock type. Mesozoic means it's Triassic and Jurassic in age, anywhere from 250 to 100 million years old. And the section that we're going to be concentrating on here is this section right here, which is the Grayback Pluton. You can see this is a plutonic intrusive here. I'll also highlight the Grants Pass Pluton. Grants Pass Pluton. Here's the Ashland Pluton. Here's the Woolly Creek Pluton. So you can see there's a lot of different types of plutonic rocks that have intruded into the Western Paleozoic terrain to make up the structure that's found there. One of the other things we'll look at, of course, a little bit is here's the Western Klamath Terrain. And the Western Klamath Terrain is kind of that bluish color. It's getting a little bit lighter. And then, of course, down here is the coastal region of the Franciscan terrain. And most of those are serpentine type structures. So these are the main terrains that we find in the Klamath Mountains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, those aren't the only ones, but those are the broad sections of terrain structures. Each one represents a different age of rock, a different type of rock, different fossil assemblages, and we can distinguish those by sometimes fault lines or separate rock types. Now, if we look at it a little more detailed, the last one, of course, was the whole mountain system, or the geologic province of the Klamath Mountains. Now we're just looking at the Oregon section. So this is the California-Oregon border here. And you'll see it's much smaller, but this has more divisions. Now there's quite a few divisions. We can continue to separate and segregate those divisions up, but you'll notice they're very similar to some of the last ones we looked at. Here's the Ashland Pluton, here's the Grayback Pluton, the Grants Pass Pluton, and this one we've added some of the Franciscan complex of the Snow Camp terrain, the Picket Peak terrain, Yellow Belly terrain, Sixes River, and Gold Beach terrain. So you can see there are many, many divisions. It's a complex geologic puzzle that has been unraveled and explained, but this is really a good way of kind of getting an overview of the different types of geology that occurs here. So to look at the structure, this is probably one of the important parts, is to try to understand, how does this put together accreted terrain? So I'm going to kind of look at this in this one cross section. This is a pretty good one. Out here are the island arcs. So island arcs are submarine volcanoes. A lot of times they build islands and sediments and fringing reefs and different things, and they are riding on the Pacific plate. Pacific plate is being subducted underneath the continent. And that's a typical subduction process. Now, one of the things that does happen with this is we get an accretionary prism. Accretionary prism is an important part. It's what gets scraped off of the surface of the ocean plate. And also it accumulates these island arcs over time, and they start to build up into this accretionary prism. Behind that prism structure is, of course, the active arc. And the active arc is the portion that contains the intense pressure and heat that builds up along this system right here. And this system here is when this slab is going down, it starts rubbing and pushing pretty hard. It mixes with ocean water and melts rock. That rock forms plutons. Here's a pluton here, a pluton here, and a pluton here, if I can just draw them correctly. So, I should probably describe a pluton a little bit to give you an idea. A pluton is a magma chamber, or a body of magma that builds up under this intense heat. That body of magma will be fairly hot, close to 1200 degrees centigrade, a little more, a little less under high pressure. But anything that's hot and liquid tends to rise within a cold body. So these plutons will rise upwards. They'll move upwards into the rock. As they rise up, they kind of squeeze up in here and work their way up as high as they can go until their heat starts to dissipate and they can't rise any further. And that's where they'll lodge. And when they lodge into that place, they start to cool. This occurs, a couple miles deep into the active arc and mountain system, and they'll cool and crystallize into a rock type called granitic rocks. Now, those granitic rocks can vary considerably, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we keep going. The other thing I want you to notice here is that we do have a extinct arc here. The extinct arc are old plutons that are already cooling, and it's behind the main compression zone. And then there's an extension period portion back here. So it's sort of extending and stretching and faulting and fracturing and folding and forming a complex system of rock behind the main active arc. So essentially, this is an accretionary terrain. Accretionary terrains are actually pretty common here on the West Coast, and they're not that complex to understand in general, although when you get into detail, they can get kind of complex in understanding the detail themselves. So again, back to the map, we'll see here what we're really looking at is this area. This area right here, where we have the Grayback Pluton. Here's the Oregon caves, that corner right there. There's where Mount Elijah is. So this is the Grayback Pluton, which is we're going to focus in on this one area to try to understand the geology of that zone. So a little close up here, we can see here's the Jurassic Pluton of the Grayback Pluton. So this is the extent of the Grayback Pluton. And what I've done here is I've put a dot. This is where, I don't know, this dot is not really in the right place. Let me annotate a little bit. So the peak of the Grayback Mountain is right here. And then Mount Elijah is right about in here. And Lake Mountain is here. So it kind of gives you an idea of the extent of the Grayback Pluton. The other thing that I highlighted here is the Williams Watershed. And the Williams Watershed is, it's a broad outline here to kind of give you a feel for the watershed itself. So, what's a watershed? Well, a watershed is basically a series of ridges and a valley. All the water that falls within this boundary exit out a single point and goes into the Applegate River to the north. So the watershed is where all the water within this region flows down into a system of streams and rivers that enter into the next river or ocean pattern. So I want to move to this map. Now, this is the map that we created. I worked with another geologist from U of O to develop this map. This is the geologic map of the Williams Watershed. So you saw here, there's the Williams Watershed. So this is a pretty simple map, but it gives a complex feeling for it. You'll notice the different colors. One of the things we'll see is there's some green colors here. The green indicates Mesozoic rocks. Those are time-stamped colors. The yellow is the alluvial material that's on top, stream gravels and sediments and things like that. They're very young, so they're yellow and bright. We'll also see that there's a lot of pink zones. The pink zones, of course, are the igneous rocks. So most pink and red are the igneous rocks that we'll see on a geologic map. The first section I want to highlight is the Western Hayfork, Jurassic Western Hayfork portion on the east flank of Williams and makes up the east ridge of the valley system itself. Now, these rocks are a little bit different. They're metasedimentary rocks. So those are the oldest rocks in Williams. The next section over here on the west side is the Rattlesnake Creek terrain. Rattlesnake Creek terrain is a little bit different than Western Hayfork in that it has these little blobs of metasediments. It has some serpentine zones, has some quartzites. There's a variety of different structures in here. This is kind of what they call a melange or a mixture of many different types of rocks that have occurred in the Rattlesnake Creek terrain. So this is a little bit younger rocks than the Western Hayfork on the east side. Now in the center, I've highlighted the Grayback Pluton, and this is the Grayback Pluton that's exposed in the Williams Valley, or at least the Williams Watershed. So it makes up the valley portion, the lower portion, and also the high mountain region where Grayback exists. Now this section here, I wanted to highlight just the valley section of the Pluton. This is what we call the low-lying diorite section of the Grayback Pluton. So if we think about that, that's going to be one we'll talk about a little bit to kind of give you an idea of the question is, why is this a valley? It's plutonic rocks, and why is this a mountain? And these are gabbroic rocks. So they're very different rock types, but made of the same plutonic structure. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to point out here is with that diorite, this is an important part. The diorite has a lot of feldspar in it. So it's a feldspar containing rock. And one of the reasons why there's a valley here is that the water picks up CO2 from the atmosphere and from the soils and makes acidic water. The feldspar, which makes up most of the diorite of the valley, in granitic rocks slowly break down to a process called hydrolysis into clays. And those clays and soluble ions and salts essentially dissolve away with the water, leaving the clay behind, a montmorillonite clay and schmectite and other types of clay structures that erode down into a low-lying valley structure. The clay can absorb and release more water than any other mineral. So clay is an important component of the erosional features of the Grayback Pluton. So essentially what we're saying is this infers that the Grayback Pluton can hold and release more water than other types of rocks, which supports the stream flow in the Williams Basin. And you can see here is a cartoon showing some rain. This erosion has occurred over 100 million years, so it's easily able to scour out a nice valley in that process. Okay, back to our map. We'll look at this. One of the things that we do see here is there's some contact aerial material. This is kind of rare in the valley in between the plutonic rocks here and the Rattlesnake Creek terrain. This is a baked regions where it was hot magma intruded into here and you sort of bake the crustal regions. Then the final thing I want to show you here is this region, and this region's on the western part of the valley. This is the limestone marble lens that occurs in Williams. Now, it's hard to see this marble lens, mostly up in Marble Canyon. You can see some remnants, and there is a really nice mine that was active at one time. Most of the marble is not well defined in this region, but it is there. This is from a fringing reef that was metamorphosed into marble millions of years ago. Now, the other thing I wanted to show, just to kind of give you an idea of the structure here, is the cross-section. Now, this is not colored cross-section, but you notice here, this is the western portion, Munger's Creek, West Fork, Williams Creek, East Fork, and Panther Gulch. But really what we want to take from this is that the structure of the rocks are dipping this way to the east. Mostly about 75, 80 degrees to the east. All the rocks are dipping this way. because in that subduction pattern, that's what we end up with is a gently dipping or steeply dipping rock sections that make up most of the rocks in the Klamath Mountains. So back to our picture of the Williams Valley and the bowl-shaped structure. And just to kind of give you a feel for what we just talked about, the watershed itself, Williams Creek runs into the Applegate right about here. The watershed basin extends all the way around here. And that is the Williams Creek Basin structure. All the water that falls in this area flows down through the streams and creeks and enters into the Applegate River, forming the Williams Valley. So there's the Williams Valley, and there's the Grayback Complex off in the distance, very much part of the Grayback Pluton structure. So again, looking down over Grayback into the valley, you can see how this would sort of overshadow the structure, but it really is very different rocks. These are the diorites down in here, high plagioclase and feldspar clay material, and these are made up of more of the ultramafic and gabbro structure that we find on the upper parts of the Grayback Pluton. So here's a picture of the upper part of Grayback Pluton. All this gray rock is our ultramafic gabbroic structure. There's some sediments up here. Most of them are being eroded off. There you can see a little bit of snow. It's probably late spring, early summer. Here's a picture looking up at the Seven from the valley itself. This is the same ridge top. The ridge top gets quite a bit of snow, and then it fills this landslide valley that comes down into Rock Creek Basin and melts down and makes a lot of stream flow. One of the great things, of course, about Grayback is really being able to get out and hike it and see the detail itself. So this is a friend of mine hiking along the Grayback Trail, just, you know, enjoying the landscapes and the beautiful scenery that's found up and down in the Grayback Complex. Enormous amount of landscape is found up in this mountain, so whenever you get a chance to go up there, and we will do that tomorrow, we will see some of these features that we found on the Grayback Complex. Here's another picture of one of the lakes. A lot of these lakes are glacial scour lakes, Cirque Lakes, reminiscent of the Pleistocene glaciation. It was fairly active in the Klamath Mountains just 10,000, 20,000 years ago, and extended up to about 1.5 million years ago. Extensive glaciation occurred throughout the Klamath Mountains, usually on the high peaks. So here's another picture of the Grayback Complex. You can see that Grayback Complex, that was the West Fork. This is the East Fork Creek coming down into the valley. And of course, here's the main stem flowing down through the main part of Williams. There's a Williams town right there. So we're focusing a little bit on the creeks, but this is one of the great things about Williams is we do have year-round flowing streams that support salmon and other types of aquatic wildlife, along with terrestrial wildlife. Few pictures of our stream system. And one of the great things about our stream systems is they do flow year-round. There are quite a few in the Applegate Basin that just don't seem to hold enough moisture. And one of the reasons why we have moisture year-round is because we have enormous amount of clay material that absorbs and holds moisture and releases it very slowly over the year. And so that's why we continue to have this groundwater influx into our surface water system. Here's a couple more pictures of our stream complex. Some of them rushing waters, some logs and stuff. This is part of my restoration projects I did one year. In fact, both of these, we place logs in there to kind of slow that water down. We really don't want it to erode very quickly. Erosion is inevitable, but slow erosion is better than quick erosion. So we really want to keep as much of the sediment in place as long as possible and let it slowly migrate down through the canyons, creating salmon habitat, pools, gravel bars, mucky regions for a variety of different aquatic insects. One of the things we do have in Williams, which makes it really valuable, are the coho. So here's a picture of some of the coho spawning on the East Fork. Probably it looks a little blurry because I'm shooting right through the water. But, you know, we do have a pretty good run of Chinook, coho, and steelhead along with cutthroat trout in our stream systems. Although I have to admit it's struggling, so we need to encourage better habitat and preserving as much of the water as possible. So this is Powell Creek, and Powell Creek Basin comes out of the northwestern portion, and that runs down into Williams Creek. And then finally, a picture just looking at the main stem running down through the valley and then entering into the Applegate River. So some of the rocks. So rocks are probably the basis for creating the valley. These rocks, you'll notice, are real blocky and angular. These, of course, are metavolcanic rocks, probably metamorphosed into quartzite structures, so they fracture and break up. They don't hold water as well as some of our granitic rocks, so we want to think about that. Here's a picture of the Western Hayfork volcaniclastic rocks. Oops, slide went too fast. This is a mossy looking rock, but you see how hard it is, hard and dense, part of that metavolcanic quartzite rock material on the eastern side of the valley. Here's another picture of the metavolcanics, very hard, dense rock. We do have sections of serpentine. Here's a rock just of serpentine. And so the rock itself is green and mottled. This is, you know, a type of rock that starts off as a basalt or a gabbro and gets leached by ocean water, heated by hydrothermal activity, and pressured under subduction processes, and ends up as serpentine or serpentinite. Serpentinite is a combination of several different minerals making up kind of a mottled, stringy rock that is really quite beautiful, but very fragile and friable. Here's a serpentine outcrop. These outcrops are kind of hard to see sometimes, but you can see the linear effect. Here's some blue sections and then some brown and white sections. You can get soapstone and serpentine, so sometimes it's very crumbly and friable. Sometimes you'll find jade, other times you'll find just serpentine nodules, but it fractures easily, slips and slides and erodes and makes a lot of landslide structures. So we do have serpentine a little bit in Williams. There are, on the peaks, here's a section of pillow basalts. These pillow basalts are reminiscent of eruptions under the water. So when volcanoes erupt basalt, they form these pillow structures as they cool, and they get accumulation of pillow basalts, which is a section of the ocean floor. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through. I did find some marble outcrops in Williams. Now, this is not necessarily from the mine itself, but it's just an outcrop of layered marble, white and gray marble that was once limestone coral reef. So we'd have some pretty good marble here in Williams. Now, one of the great ones that we'll be talking about is the gabbro. Now, the gabbro itself is an interesting rock. It's a dark, igneous, intrusive rock. So it has large crystals. You can see the large crystals, fairly dense, welded together. So gabbro is an intrusive igneous rocks. It has a lot of calcium plagioclase, feldspar, and clinopyroxene. So those are the two major things, plagioclase and clinopyroxene. They can contain olivine, biotite, magnetite, apatite, ilmenite, orthopyroxene. So gabbro really is a rock with low silica content. So we really don't find quartz in gabbro. Most of it is combined with these other rocks. The other thing about gabbro, can contain chromium, nickel, cobalt, zircon, gold, silver, platinum, and copper sulfides. So gabbro can be a very interesting rock. Here's another picture of some of the gabbro structures. So gabbro is a very common rock, but you can see these dark pyroxenes that are scattered throughout the rock. All these are the dark pyroxenes that are common in gabbro, and in between are these white plagioclase. The white plagioclase have dark riddled structures in them because this is a high temperature igneous rock. So the high temperature plagioclase are dark, the low temperature ones are white, but it's typical gabbroic granitic type rock that we find in various places. Here's another picture of a gabbro called a norite. This one has some green parts of olivine crystals, which are part of the peridotite section of the upper and middle mantle, so below the crust itself. So this rock actually comes from the upper mantle and is lodged in the crust itself. Here's some gabbro with plagioclase dikes. Here's the dike running through the gabbro. Here's another section of gabbro, pretty uniform rock sample here. Really kind of interesting rock, that we'll find in the Grayback Pluton. I wanted to show some pictures of diorite. You notice the diorite's much lighter, has a lot more of this white plagioclase mineral. The white plagioclase mineral is the one that breaks down to clay. So we end up with enormous clay deposits. Here's some quartz diorite, which indicates that it has a little extra quartz in it. So quartz diorite and diorite are very common for the valley making rock. So this is the portion that makes up the valley, is made up of diorite. And then one of the rocks that's important here are the myelinites. And myelinites are a fault rock. So these are made in the fault systems between those terrains. There is a series of faults that are found in the Grayback Complex that these are made in that section. So as that subduction process continues, it rubs against the other rock and it forms this myelinitic structure, which are banded gneissic structures with rotated crystals of different types of garnets and things that are found in the myelinites. Just want to mention some of the neat rocks here. So one of the things about the Grayback Pluton that make it unique or different is that there's a lot of magma mixing. And this one shows a few of the different types of gabbros that might be seen. Here's like little pillows with feldspathic regions in between the gabbro. Here's some splotchy areas of dark gabbro with the white feldspathic zones around it. Probably of anorthosite plagioclase. Here's some other sections that show some mixing, magma mixing. So one of the great things about gabbros is that gabbros are found here with pyroxene and olivine and calcium feldspar. And right here is there the mafic zone. So gabbro and basalt are the mafic type rocks that we find in here. We don't find a lot of the ultramafic ones, at least not in the Grayback Plutons. Most of this is going to be the mafic structure of the gabbro and the diorite. Those are the two types. Well, I put a chart up here. This is a chart of the plagioclase mineral group, just to kind of get you an idea that plagioclase is not a mineral, it's a mineral group. The minerals themselves are listed here: albite, oligoclase, andesine, labradorite, balutonite, and anorthite. These are basically different types of plagioclase minerals that show up in gabbros. So we might see some of these. I'm hoping to see some labradorite. Those are the ones that sparkle blues and greens. You might have seen those. People love to collect those. Anorthite is very white. But the idea here is that plagioclase is a group of minerals. And of course, Here's the charts to look at the plagioclase. So here's a section where plagioclase occurs. Here's pyroxenes, and the gabbro basalt zone is this vertical zone where we find a little bit of olivine, lots of pyroxene, dark pyroxenes, some plagioclase, and various different types of amphiboles and micas. But the idea here is that this chart shows these are the kind of rocks we would expect in a gabbro, and in a geologic science, we use these triangle things to talk about all the different plutonic rocks that exist. So these are all the different names. Here's the granite. We do not have any granite. We don't have any granodiorites. We have this section here, which is diorites, gabbros, norites, and quartz gabbros. So this is the section that we have here. I'm not going to linger on this, but this is how we categorize different types of granitic rocks. So really to look at the rocks themselves, the plutonic rocks, which are the ones we'll see. Granite, we don't have any granite because granite has pink feldspar. We don't have any granodiorite. We have diorites and gabbros in the Grayback Pluton. Sometimes we have some quartz diorites, but these are the two. Now, diorite is equivalent to an andesite volcanic rock. Gabbro is equivalent to a basaltic volcanic rock, but that means that the gabbro was produced from basalt that's been remelted and recrystallized under pressure to form gabbro. Okay, so one of the great things about gabbro is it really makes up an important part of the ocean floor. Gabbros form deep in the ocean floor and also in the upper mantle. They form from crystallization, differentiation, and fractional crystal settling. So that's really kind of interesting. Those are terms to describe the process. Here is the section of the ocean floor that's so important. The layers, how it's made, the sediments at the top of the ocean floor, the pillow basalts. I showed you a few pillow basalts on the surface. We got sheeted dikes, and then we have the layered gabbros and the layered ultramafic rocks. So this is the section we'll be looking at, are the gabbros. I put a list of different types of gabbros. So gabbro is a term that describes a lot of different processes, and these are some of those. I'm not going to linger into those. One of the things that I do want to talk about a little bit is this report on magma mixing and mingling in the Grayback Pluton. This was done by Ken Scott Johnson, and he did a thesis back in 1991 just to look at the Grayback Pluton. Here's a couple of the pictures of things that he found. These large cusp-like shaped structures of basaltic enclaves inside these granodiorite dikes. He found these large rings within these granodiorite hosts, so that means there's a lot of mixing of different types of gabbroic rocks in the Grayback Pluton, which makes it quite unique. Here's some linear features that they found also, microgabbroic enclaves that are really reminiscent of mixing of different types of gabbros. And then of course, this contact between these coarse grain granodiorites and gabbro structures that make it kind of interesting rather than just the uniform homogeneous gabbros. I showed you some of the pictures earlier. So, okay, back to the maps themselves. So we'll see that these gabbroic rocks are what make up the part of the Grayback Pluton, that's the upper mountain region. And then back to the map of the Williams Watershed, you'll see that this is what we looked at already. The pink areas are the igneous rocks of the Grayback Pluton. The faults are found on each side. There's a fault here running up the center of the valley and up the East Fork. And there's a fault over here on the West Fork that separates these three different types of structures of rocks. So that's basically the geology. It's not really that complex. And we'll talk a little about Williams. Became a township about in the 1850s when gold was discovered in the surrounding mountains around the Grayback Pluton. So one of the questions, of course, might be is why was there gold there? Well, Gold is obviously found in submarine rocks that are pushed up onto the continent. The Grayback Pluton was intruded fairly hot, and when it gets hot, it heats up water around the Pluton and the surrounding rocks. That forms a circulation that concentrates gold in veins. So that's what happened. The gold was found not in the Pluton, but in the rocks around the Pluton. A few of the areas in Powell Creek and Findlay Road were on the edge of the Grayback Pluton, but those are the ones that contained the gold that was found in Williams. So here's a couple crusty guys, the early Williamsites that dug down into the mountain. There wasn't really a lot of hard rock mining in Williams, and because it's really hard work, and it's a lifestyle in itself, not a great lifestyle, and you don't get very much gold. Here's a couple pictures of some of the gold that's found in the Klamath Mountains, some of the nuggets. And here's a hard rock mine underneath where you would dig into a quartz vein that was formed from those hydrothermal fluids, and it concentrates gold. So the idea there is that most of the gold was placer found as nuggets and using hydraulic mining systems. So the ditches that were dug by the Chinese to bring water down to the mines were eventually put under high pressure and squirted out onto the land to basically wash it all down and try to accumulate or pick out nuggets and grains of gold. And of course, this made a big mess of the valley, and the people that lived in the valley were mad at the miners. So eventually all that had to go. So there's really none of that going on anymore, but the remnants is that it's left behind bare soil and rugged rocks piles that we do find in some of the gold mining areas in Williams. So back to the valley system itself is, again, an area that drains a lot of moisture from the high peaks of the Grayback Pluton. So whenever you get rain and snow, most of it falls on the higher elevations. It will filter down into the soils of the granitic rocks of the Pluton structure, and the clay itself will absorb and hold it and slowly release it over the year, producing some pretty good stream flow that we find in Williams. And of course, here's just a few more of the stream patterns that we find. Maybe not the largest creeks and streams in the area, but again, we get a real consistent flow patterns that we find in Williams. Now, back in 2003 to 2005, I did a study on the groundwater of the Williams Creek watershed in conjunction with understanding the geology. And this is really one of our most important things, was to understand what's causing all this water flow. So we went down to the mouth and we measured the stream flow during the year, and I was able to build this structure that collected data, and we come up with a nice discharge chart. So this discharge chart shows the pattern of the amount of water that's flowing out in 1 year. The other thing that was important was us to get a rainfall, stream height, and well yield chart. So this really is one that shows the creek. So this is the creek height. Whoops, my slide. The creek height goes along, and all of a sudden in the winter it starts to rise up and comes down, rises up and comes down. So this is really the creek flow system. Down here is the rainfall. So whenever we get a large rainfall event, the creek jumps up quite a bit, and then it slowly discharges. So whenever we get some good rainfall, we get a high flow in the creek, and then it slowly discharges over a long period of time. And really one of the things that we were monitoring were these triangle portions, is the height of the water table. So the water table was fairly low during the summer, and then during the winter it rises up. The water table gets pretty high, and then it slowly goes back down to this low point in that area.
32.
So that was just one of the charts that we built to try to understand, the water flow in Williams. we found that the groundwater flow patterns really follow the stream patterns themselves. They come out of the Grayback Pluton in the upper regions and flows down through the stream patterns. But this is really the groundwater flow. So in this map, we can see that the direction of flow is always down towards the lower part. So groundwater itself goes from the high regions to the low regions, following essentially the stream flow patterns that we find on the surface. We looked at the subsurface to try to interpret where the water table was accumulating, and the water table accumulated down below the surface soil and in the underlying soil, and then into this basement structure where the water table varies at different heights, but essentially it's going from the upper portion and flowing down to the lower portion near the Williams Creek. So this is really kind of interesting to understand a little bit about the subsurface and the water system that is flowing underground in the groundwater. But one of the greatest maps we came up with in this study was really the water yield. Where is most of the groundwater in the Williams Valley? Now this map shows the yellow is low yield, the green is moderate yield, and the blue is the highest yield for groundwater. So you can see there's a large section of groundwater here at the Munger Creek West Fork region. There is a large section down here where the Powell Creek enters the main stem, and there's a large section of groundwater down in the lower portion in the gravels, the lower part of Williams. But there's pockets of other large flow areas or storage zones that contain enormous amount of groundwater. Unfortunately, the yellow areas is where most of the people live, and that's where you don't get much groundwater yield in their wells. So I thought this was kind of interesting. It's very useful to understand where most of the groundwater is being stored. So a few more of the creeks. We have creeks coming off of the Grayback Pluton. This is Pipe Fork or East Fork, headwaters of East Fork, and it flows year round at a steady rate, whether there's rain or not. Comes out of springs from the Grayback Mountain. It continuously flows down the mountain at a certain rate. In the winter, it roars down through here, but it's pretty heavily forested, so it slows down and doesn't have a lot of erosion in its flow pattern. Here's some sections of the East Fork and some of the restoration that we've tried to do to slow the water down, make more pools, create habitat for salmon that will maintain that run for a long period of time. Here's another picture of some salmon running around in the gravels. Here's a red. If you've ever seen these barren gravel zones, this is where the salmon have scoured the gravels, laid their eggs, and then either departed. So we do have quite a few spawning beds in the Williams Creek Basin scattered throughout all of the major streams. We also have the easternmost stand of the Port Orford Cedar right on the edge, on the eastern edge of the Grayback Pluton. Here's a nice Port Orford Cedar section. This comes out of the Pipe Fork Watershed, and it has some really old growth habitat up there that is really quite beautiful. We're still in the process of trying to preserve this land forever and for the future. So, talk with the Williams Community Forest Project. This is a struggle. We're still in the process of purchasing this land. We have it lined up. We're just hoping that it all comes together. Pipe Fork has waterfalls. Here's one of the waterfalls that flows year round in Pipe Fork, producing pools and water from the springs. It has an enormous amount of wood that falls down in the creek, but it continuously flows water year round. And of course, here's another one of the falls. There are several falls up in there, again, going over the gabbroic rock. So these are all gabbros that are part of the system in the Pipe Fork Basin. And there are many other types of streams like this that contain beautiful habitat that come out of the Grayback Pluton. Here's the maiden hair fern and the lilies, along with the pools and structures that are delicate habitat we find in our streams in Williams. Here's just a broad picture of almost an ancient looking habitat that's developed with the ferns and undergrowth. By leaving a forest alone for 100 years, it becomes very much an old growth habitat that is difficult to traverse, but really quite beautiful to behold. So I got a few pictures of the Grayback Pluton.
So I'm not sure. I think Chaz just crashed. But hopefully he'll be back in a sec, and maybe just hang with us for a minute and we'll see what happens here. Well, I'm not sure what to do, everyone. Chaz sort of froze and then crashed, and I'm trying to get a hold of him to see if he's coming back. Maybe hang with us for a minute, and we'll just see if, give him another minute, and if he comes back, then we'll continue.
Hey, I'm back. Hey, I'm back. So I guess I lost my connection for a little bit. Did anybody notice? I guess so. That's okay. That does happen. So I'm back. I think I'm here. So this is where we left off. We were looking at this is the picture of the trail from Elizabeth Rother's book to Mount Elijah. And you can find that in her book. So we're basically going to go up this road and then hike up to Mount Elijah tomorrow. The idea there is it's a 4.3 mile round trip, and hopefully not too much too much work, but hopefully we'll see the Bigelow Lakes and other kind of features that are really great in the area. Here's another map of the hiking trails going up to Mount Elijah. And then finally, a nice picture of the Grayback Mountain Complex that looking up from Williams, just showing the lush forest that grows on this complex. You know, since I took this picture, there's been some logging, so we do have logging up here, but hopefully we will maintain a normal forest habitat on the Grayback Complex for many years to come. Okay, and finally, I want to just kind of thank some of the people that have added to this presentation. Vegetation Maps and Study by the Oregon Caves. They did an incredible study on the vegetation mapping. So you might want to look at that. Magma Mixing, I mentioned that. That's a Geoscience World books. You can always look under the Grayback Pluton for magma mixing. Here's a petrology of Grayback Igneous Complex by Gottschalk's 1969. Here's the Williams Creek Watershed Assessment that I did in 2005. That's a great one. Grayback Magma Mixing Thesis by Ken Johnson. Here's the Williams Area Trail Guide by Evelyn Rother, and of course, the Siskiyou Crest by Luke Rudiger. So you might just look at some of those as references. Okay, so that was it. I hope we got through all of it. Does it seem like we did okay?
Yeah, I think that was great, Chaz. I am not seeing a ton of questions right now in the chat. So if people do have questions, go ahead and type them in. I did have one thing that I wanted to kind of ask you about is that, I've always noticed that the Williams Valley was a little bit soggy in the winter, and you've got those big drainage ditches on the side of the road when you're coming up into like the Williams store area and stuff. And sometimes those are really filled up in the winter and really charged. And I always kind of figured that was because just being at the western end of the valley there, you get a little bit more fog and moisture and such. But after hearing your presentation tonight, I was wondering, is that partially because of all those underlying clays underneath the sediment layers there in the valley?
You bet. You bet. So clay has an advantage of storing an enormous amount of groundwater, but it also resists infiltration of water on the surface, especially if it's dry. So clay soaks up water slowly. It stores more water than any other type of mineral, but those ditches are to keep the flooding from occurring and try to keep it moving on out of the valley. Otherwise, we'd have problems. Williams must have been a real quagmire before man came down through there with giant forest trees everywhere. So we're really looking at the remnants of a beautiful habitat of wetlands and other kinds of structures in Williams that might have been there. And people can raise their hand. There is a hand raising thing. If you look at the reactions, you can raise a hand for asking any questions. A really great way of doing that. So anybody has any questions, you can do that.
There also was a comment, Chaz, that at the beginning you mentioned putting some information into the chat, and that didn't seem to really have showed up in the chat thing. So, or in the chat box. Yeah. People were wondering about that.
Well, I gave it a try. I basically have an outline. I could email it out or send it out. It seems like it doesn't really copy and paste real well. I've had some problems with it not taking all the information I want to put in it. So maybe that's the problem.
Well, unless we have any other questions or anybody wants to raise their hand and ask anything of you, Chaz.
I see Ginger has a question there.
Yeah, Chaz, I'm sorry, I missed your description of the hike tomorrow. Could you repeat that?
Okay, so the hike is starting at 9 a.m. from the Williams Grange. So we're all gonna meet there and either carpool or drive together to the trailhead, which is probably about 12 miles up the mountain. And then the hike will be, I think it's about 4 miles. Is that right, Cheryl? About 4 miles round trip, and not a lot of elevation climb. So I'm going to ask Cheryl if she'll talk about that. Cheryl, would you like to speak about the hike?
Sure. So it's a moderate hike. We'll start the trailhead, which is on the BLM road, goes 4.5 miles up the mountain to Mount Elisha, goes through a treed area that's quite beautiful, really nice big old Doug fir, and we'll go past the Bigelow Lakes. If people want to, they can spend after going up to the mountain and looking at all the scenery, we can go back down and spend time at Bigelow Lakes. So I would encourage people to consider that they may want to spend more time than even us. But I'd like to go up the mountain and then go back down to the lakes and explore the lakes, because they have this time of year, a lot of the vegetation has the wildflowers are gone, but there's still other vegetation there to explore and explore the lakes.
I hope it's not too late to join the hike.
What did you say, Ginger?
I hope it's not too late to join the hike. How do we? I hadn't signed up for it previously.
You can join.
It's pretty open, Ginger. Whoever shows up is who's going to end up going up there. Hopefully it'll be good. So if you want to come and your husband, that'd be great.
Well, is there any other questions people have, or should we wrap this up and actually go take a look at it tomorrow and get out on the ground and learn more as we enjoy the scenery up there? All right.
I know myself, I'm going to be looking for those gabbroic rocks and the mixing and the magma mixing. So I'll be looking for rock outcrops, but there's a lot of things to see. So I'm kind of excited to get up there. It's going to be a beautiful day. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming and participating tonight and joining in on this conversation. Like I said, we're going to be having we're hoping to have one of these a month from now until, the end of the winter, so that we can spend our dark nights learning a little bit more about the Siskiyous and, just share that information across the community. So thanks for coming tonight. Thanks for participating. For all you that we will see tomorrow, we're looking forward to it. So thanks again. And we're gonna shut this thing down. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks everyone for coming along.